Arizona is now number one on KenPom and number one unanimously. So are the Wildcats clearly the team to beat? Well, we'll figure that out. This is Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network around. I'm your host, Leif, your resident college basketball guru, stats nerd, point guard by game, and ball knower by trade. And I'm excited to talk Arizona hoops with you today, just like every day, but especially so because I've got Casey Jacobson here with me. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This is the last call for football. It's Super Bowl Sunday. So if you're a new customer, just bet $5 and get $200 bonus bets if you win. Today on the show, like I said, to complement the pass first point guard and myself, I got the flamethrower at the two guard, Casey Jacobson, here to analyze. Has Arizona overtaken Michigan as favorites in his mind? And we'll also analyze, has Arizona grown since we last spoke in December? And lastly, go through the championship prerequisites and see if the Wildcats check Casey's boxes. Well, without further ado, let's dive right in. Casey, thank you once again for joining. And I want to give you the chance to articulate what's changed for you, if anything, in the ranking number one, because I've seen your poll, and I want to tell people I've seen the poll, but it doesn't always indicate the team that you believe is best. It's just the team that's best at the moment. Have you changed your mind, Arizona versus Michigan, since we last talked, and what has changed since that point?
So I have changed my mind. Arizona is now, they've been, I think in the last two polls, they've been number one in the country for me. And yeah, so what has swayed me or what have they done? Well, clearly they just keep winning. That certainly helps. It's a combination of, I do feel like Arizona is the most consistent team in the country. Arizona is the most physical team that my two eyes have seen. I have seen Arizona. I've called two of their games live, and then I was just a fan. I live in Phoenix. I went to their game against San Diego State. I was just a fan in that game watching. So I've seen them play 3 times live, and it is clear to me there are other physical teams in the country, Houston being another, but Arizona's on another level there. So it's a combination of just over the course of the season thinking, all right, what type of skills do these college basketball teams have that will just translate no matter what conference they play in, where they're seated in the NCAA tournament. And Arizona's size, their toughness, their consistency, their defense certainly is a part of that. The other part of it, though, Leif, is the Michigan Wolverines. They were so dominant in the first 6 weeks of the season. They were beating teams by an average of 35 or 36 points in the first 6 weeks of the season. They beat Gonzaga by 40. Gonzaga, by the way, who's only lost one game to Michigan. They beat San Diego State by 40, who, by the way, is the Aztecs are 9-1 currently in the Mountain West Conference. They're probably going to win that conference. They beat Auburn by 30. Auburn's been up and down, but Auburn is now 5-3 in the SEC, like in the upper half of the league. So they were beating the crap out of these teams in a way that Arizona wasn't. Arizona was winning. They beat Florida by like 6 or something. So good wins, but Arizona wasn't completely just stepping on people. And so I think, though, if you're going to pin me down and ask me, like, what was kind of the point that made you think maybe Arizona is as good or better than Michigan? I think it all started with the Alabama game. That game was in Birmingham. And the second half, I was dumbfounded. I remember I was watching that game in a Oklahoma City hotel because I was about to do a game the next day. And I was so excited to watch Arizona play Alabama. Alabama's really dangerous. They can drop threes on you. And I was like, all right, I want to see. And it wasn't even competitive in the second half. It was also the coming out party for Braden Burries, who, the 5-star freshman, had been not very good in the first 2 or 3 weeks. He had 28 points in that one. It was also, for me personally, the spotlight on Ivan Karchenkov, who had 5 steals in that game. I really didn't know if he was going to be like, their defensive stopper or whatever. And then, I think so that game opened my eyes. That game was like, okay, this Arizona team is not the same as everybody else. So I don't know if that answers your questions. I would still put, so as we record this, Leif, Michigan and Michigan State are playing tonight.
True.
That game is in East Lansing. I think Michigan will win, but I don't have a crystal ball. If Michigan wins that game, or they win it convincingly, to me, Michigan and Arizona are in a tier by themselves. I do believe it's very possible that we could be looking at a 2021 situation. If you remember that college basketball.
Baylor and Gonzaga.
Yeah, Baylor and Gonzaga. Baylor and Gonzaga completely separated themselves about halfway through the year from everybody else. They were on a collision course to play in the national championship. They did. Baylor won. But I'm starting to draw comparisons to that. But again, we will see how Michigan fares at Michigan State tonight.
And that's a very good point. I will say, from just an anecdotal standpoint, I wasn't terribly impressed with Michigan in beating Nebraska. They were at home. They were 11.5-point favorites, won by 3 in a game where Nebraska led for 36.5 minutes without 2 of their better players. But you never know. Arizona's had games where they haven't looked great throughout the majority of the game and then pulled away. But you touched on something I want to talk about is Braden Burries. Last time we spoke, it was kind of the beginning of his ascension. His first 5 games, averaging about 8 a game. His next 10, about 19. He's now in Big 12 play, about 17 per game, and he's stepped up in the biggest moments. And the thing I want to get your read on is Arizona. I came into the season saying the best player would be Koa Pete. The most important player would be Jaden Bradley. I thought the third best player would be Braden Burries, but maybe the second or third most important would be Mo Krivas. I still kind of feel that way.
Yeah.
But when you really look at it, there's 8 players that play, and I'd say 6 of them, you could make an argument any given night who's going to be the best player. And to me, that's the best strength that Arizona has. It almost reminds me of those Warriors titles that said strength in numbers. And I think Arizona has the best combination of high-end talent, size, and depth. And because many teams, and we saw this, I was live at the BYU game. It was awesome. The game, to me, felt like 38 minutes of Arizona just wearing a team down, not even playing their best, because Arizona had 8 guys and BYU had 2. And I know Rob Wright's up there, but I really feel like it's AJ and Richie. And if you can take away one of them, maybe even both of them, you beat BYU. You take away Koa Pete, Mo Krivas, Tobe Awaka, points in the paint, all these things that Arizona dominates, and typically BYU did that in spades, and Arizona for 38 minutes was up double digits. And then they had a collapse in the final minutes and showed their poise, their toughness. So my question to you is there something to be said for having that dude, or is it a better thing for Arizona to have that many guys to step up on different occasions?
It's a fantastic question, Leif, but it also it depends, right? And I know it's a silly it's a cliche answer, not really answering your question. It depends on, so I love balance. I absolutely love balance. I played on my favorite teams at Stanford. I was our leading scorer, but like I had a bunch of dudes. We had a bunch of NBA players. To me, you want to play with a lot of talent so that you're harder to play against, you're harder to scout. And if one guy has a bad night, it doesn't beat you, right? Like the national championship back-to-back UConn teams. Those guys had dudes. There wasn't one guy who was like completely dominant like Purdue had with Zach Edey. UConn was balanced across the board. So we have seen recently in college basketball. The thing is, but what I'm trying to say is there are a lot of teams that have balance, but their dudes are right? They're like, oh, we're so balanced. We spread the offense, but you guys don't really have NBA players. Like your balance is a bunch of good college players. So it matters that Arizona has balance with multiple pros. That is what you want. So it's not just generic balance. It's awesome balance. Michigan is like this too. Michigan has balance. They have multiple NBA players in my mind, led by Yaxel Lendeborg. You would argue that Arizona has more NBA players than Michigan does, and I would agree with that. And so there's maybe another notch that Arizona has above Michigan. So I'm putting even more Wildcat bricks on that building. But you look at some of the other teams in the country that Arizona is and will be competing for a national championship. Duke, they have one dude, Cameron Boozer, who pretty much dominates, right? Houston is a little bit more balanced, but Kingston Fleming's is their freshman point guard has kind of risen above. Michigan State has one big point guard that kind of controls everything that they do. Purdue, they have one point guard that kind of controls everything that they do. So I do think that the best teams in the country are my favorite teams in the country: Arizona, Michigan. I really like Iowa State. I know they lost back-to-back games 3 weeks ago. I still think that Iowa State is a national championship contender. They have multiple pros. They have balance as well. So that's really what I'm looking for in these teams. But let's not get it twisted. You need like big-time talent. Balance isn't enough. You need to have guys that could be averaging 20 on any other team in the country, but that are cool with averaging 14 because they're playing with other dudes.
That's well put and spoken from someone who's done it. We're going to take a break, and I'm going to give you a little bit later my prerequisites, and you can add to whatever you like. Coming up, I'll give my 5 prerequisites to winning a championship. I've written this for a couple years, and I think Arizona hits them all. You can dispute that if you'd like. We got that, as well as discussing the Big 12 hierarchy and just what makes Arizona so special as a team. All that and more coming up next on Locked On Wildcats. It's the last chance for football. It's the last call with Super Bowl Sunday coming up. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. It's Super Bowl 60, the Seahawks and the Patriots, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back to Locked On Wildcats, and thank you for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports network around. We sincerely appreciate it, and I sincerely appreciate you. You already live your team every single day, so now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Wildcats with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonwildcats.supercast.com or just check the link in the show notes to learn more. With all that said, welcome back. Casey Jacobson, kind enough to join us from Fox Sports, Stanford sniper. If you guys are old enough to remember watching this guy tear up the Pac-12 or Pac-10, excuse me. Mm-hmm. I have a take, and I think I touched on this a little bit last time, but I want to give it a more concise version of what I said prior. I think that, so you, for reference, for everyone listening, he called the Arizona State game and the Cincinnati game. So I want to touch on where you felt growth was from those games as well as from the start of the season. But here's the take that I've been kind of sitting on for a little while. Before the season, I said this team reminded me of Duke of last year. Not quite the same star power with Flagg, Knippel, but they had the same positions with Pete equals Flagg and Knippel and Burries. And the biggest part was really that they had size in spades. And so every team that would try to drive against Arizona would be stifled. They could guard you different ways. That part, I think, is more true than the Pete and Flagg and the Burries and Knippel. That said, Burries kind of looks like Knippel to me at times, taking over with poise, looking far more ahead. But now I'm starting to think this team resembles a bit of Florida from last year in the sense that their backcourt can score 55 against BYU, and their backcourt can combine for 18 points against ASU, and they score 89 points against ASU and 86 against BYU, and they can beat you so many different ways, because Walter Clayton was great last year. He absolutely was. But Thomas Houck, Ruben Chinyelu, Micah Hanlockton, all these different guys, and I think Karchenkov is like this year's clearly Thomas Houck, who was my favorite player in the country last year. Karchenkov is my favorite player on Arizona. I just think he does everything right. So the reason I say that is those teams had stars. They had an All-American first teamer, a most outstanding player, as it turned out, in Walter Clayton. But they also had a first-team All-American preseason guy in Condon, who won't reach that, but he's a very good player. Chinyelu gets a ton of rebounds. Houck is going to be an All-American this year. And those guys were just depth pieces, along with Elijah Martin and Will Richard, who are in the NBA. I feel like Arizona's that this year. They've got 6 NBA players on their roster. Who knows when they get there? You alluded to that in a moment ago. But it's not only that. They play unselfishly, and They score 45% of their shot attempts are within 5 feet. 58% of their points scored are from 2. 22 more percent of those are from the free throw line. So what I call paint-oriented points. They score 80% of their points from paint-oriented points, and that gets you 72 points per game. So any threes they make is gravy. That's a lot. I'm aware. I've had that kind of on my chest for a while. What do you make of that?
Well, I agree with some of it, most of it, I would say. And I did listen to your podcast when you were interviewing somebody, and he was like, "Pop, that's your stat, Pop. I like it." And I think, it makes a ton of sense to me that Arizona leads the country in pop. Points in the paint combined with free throws. They're going to be leading in that category all season long. And you know why that's important? You know why pop is so important, Leif, is because it's reliable. It's sustainable. 3-point shooting is by nature, because they're long shots. They are finicky, right? There's like, this night we're hitting them, this night we're not. It can really swing certain teams' performances, teams that shoot a lot of threes, right? Alabama shoots over 50% of their shots from 3. So if they're having a tough night, they are super vulnerable, right? That is the argument. However, I would say on the flip side of the coin, let me go back to what you're saying. So you're saying that this Arizona team reminds you of last year's national championship Florida team, the way that they're constructed. You compared a couple of guys, Braden Burries to Walter Clayton Jr. last year. That's all well and good. I agree in some. Here's where I disagree. Walter Clayton Jr. was a fourth year senior or a fifth year senior.
I was going Burries to Knipple. I was saying that there was an All-American and an All-Conference level guard on there. I don't think Bradley even is at the level of Clayton, but I do think that they meet the prerequisite of All-Conference guards.
Yeah. And the front courts for Florida versus Arizona certainly are similar to me. Okay, so Duke last year, Duke was the number 1 offense in the country. I think they were a top 5 defense as well. KenPom were the number 1 team in the nation, and going into the tournament, I think they even finished number 1 in the nation, even though they lost in the Final Four to Houston. Duke, to me, was my favorite. I picked them to win. I thought they were the best team in the country, but they had 3 freshmen in their starting lineup, right? Which is what Arizona has right now. And I talked about this on the broadcast when I was doing the Cincinnati game. The only team in the last 25 years, or maybe even in the history of college basketball, I haven't done the full research to cement this. So please, if there's comments or people that know, email us, whatever I want to know. The only team to win a national title with 3 freshmen in their starting lineup, to my knowledge, is the 2012 Kentucky Wildcats with Anthony Davis.
I think Duke did too, with Jahlil Okafor, Tyus Jones, and Justice Winslow in 2015. But I think those are the only 2.
Yep, and Grayson Allen coming off the bench as their 6th man in that. Okay, so we got two teams. So it can be done. So if you're an Arizona Wildcat, it can be done. What you're doing is like not unprecedented. It doesn't like eliminate you, but it is rare. It's rare. And you would argue that in today's college basketball world, I know the freshmen are amazing all across college basketball. It's like one of the headlining stories of the season. But in college basketball world today, guys are even older. They're coming back because they're getting paid. So most teams have 4-year seniors, 5-year seniors, and guys who are suing the NBA to come in after they've been out of college, and 6 years and all this stuff. So you are playing against veteran teams. Duke last year found that out. They went to Houston. I thought Duke was a better team than Houston. They had more dudes. They were a little bit more athletic. They were certainly better offensively, but they lost. And so it's just another reminder to me that this kind of stuff matters when we're splitting hairs between, hey, Arizona versus Gonzaga, Arizona versus Michigan. Michigan's one of the older teams. Michigan only plays 1 freshman pretty much in their rotation. And so it's a thing. And then the other thing I would say, I think we were going to talk about what are the improvements or maybe a weakness or something that Arizona. I said it on the Cincinnati broadcast that the 3-point shooting is something that other people will bring up to me. Like, hey, this is a team that doesn't shoot a lot of threes. What's up with that? Like, is that really going to bite them in the butt in the NCAA tournament? And I would always say to that, it's not a weakness because when they shoot them, they make them. It's just not something that they prioritize. However, in conference play, Arizona's shooting just under 34% from three. Their 3-point percentage has dropped in Big 12 play against some pretty good defense. Their 3-point percentage ranks 11th in the Big 12 conference. They make 5 threes a game, which is last. I mean, to put that in perspective, Texas Tech, who leads the Big 12 in threes per game, makes 13. So almost like more than double. So it is something. I just like all the other really good teams in the Big 12 that I think can win a national championship, Houston, Texas Tech, BYU, Iowa State, they all make almost double what Arizona makes from the 3-point line. So I just, what's the closest game, Leif, that Arizona has played like on a score basis?
BYU 86-83.
Yeah, and the last minute of that game was bonkers. You know that. Like, Arizona was clearly the better team on that night, and then stuff got a little bit squirrely. Okay, we can admit that. However, by math, it was the closest game that they had played all season on the final score. And you know what BYU, how many threes they made?
13.
That is what it's going to take. And there are teams that it's what it's going to take to beat Arizona. I'm talking in the 12 to 15 3-point shot making category. That is what it's going to take to beat Arizona. And there are some teams that can do it. Like, if you're an Arizona fan, you're like, I don't know if there's that many teams that can do it. No. There are definitely some teams that can do it. Michigan, their only loss this year was at home to Wisconsin. Wisconsin made 15 threes. And Wisconsin isn't even ranked, but they are a team that can light you up. So does it worry me? It absolutely worries me. Still, it's the only thing that really worries me. I would say also there's 2 things that worry me. The 3-point shooting, the fact that Arizona they just don't do it. They don't do it. It's not that they can do it. They don't do it, which is pretty much the same thing, okay? And we have never seen their freshmen play in a Final Four, right? So I don't think it's going to be a big deal in the early rounds, but in the Final Four, it's a massive stage, a stage I never played on, but a stage I know I would have been nervous on. And Koa Pete's played in a lot of really big high school games. He's played in a lot of big college games so far, but he's never played in the Final Four before. And with college kids, you just don't know. Those young guys can sometimes get overwhelmed.
And those are fair. We'll touch on the prerequisites to a championship team, but I have one question, just a quick one. This is a quick hitter. It's a 2-part question. One, if I said you get Arizona or the field for the championship, I'm assuming you go the field.
Of course.
And if I said Arizona or the Big 12 for the Big 12 regular season, who are you going?
Oh my goodness. That's where like my favorite teams to me are almost exclusive, with the exception of Michigan. All my favorite teams that I think are just totally awesome are in the Big 12. So to answer your question, I'll take the Big 12. That sounds like a good deal.
Okay, I'd take Arizona for the Big 12 just to win the regular season, but over the championship, it's a little audacious to say Arizona. But honestly, they're pretty good. We'll touch on how great they are, the prerequisites to winning a championship, all next on Locked On Wildcats. This is Mazda's moving the game forward for those who show there's more than just the score than what's on the screen. Braden Burries deserves a spotlight for this one, scoring 29 points and icing the game with a block against BYU. That's the type of moment that reminds us what it really takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, and I never quit. We put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to Mazda because there's more to you. Welcome back to Locked On Wildcats. Leif Thulin, joined by Casey Jacobson of Fox Sports, former sharpshooter. And we have a question here. We talked about Arizona's 3-point shooting, and we had a similar discussion. And you've turned the page a little bit, saying that there's only so many teams that can beat. So many people in the early season were like, oh, if they match up with Alabama or Louisville, it's a really bad matchup because of just the volume of threes. My contention was, I'll take Arizona's math because they're going to get so many easy shots versus the amount of threes that shoot you out of a game. you absolutely are right that you can lose a game because they're minus 27, a 9.9 3-pointer disparity against BYU. And BYU hit 10 threes in the second half, and Arizona rarely eclipses 10 threes in a total game. There is a margin for error, that's for sure. But Arizona, if they get threes, they blow you out, is my opinion. And so that's one thing I want to say. It's like I do think Arizona doesn't shoot a ton of threes, and that keeps them in closer games. But it's not like they're Virginia playing a slow pace, and so they keep teams in games that allowed them to be vulnerable to being upset by UMBC, or so many close games even in their championship run. Arizona is fully capable of blowing teams out, and if they hit any threes, they run you out of the gym. So here are my 5 prerequisites to winning. Actually, I've got 4, and I kind of got a wild card, goofy 5th one. Mm-hmm. My 4 prerequisites to winning a national championship. And I think I actually founded this with Matt Muehlbach, a former Arizona guy, back when I was working for Utah, strangely enough. All-conference or all-American guard. I think Arizona's got an all-American in Bradley and an all-conference guard in Burries, so they hit that. Size, which helps you rebound and defend. Arizona's got that in spades. We know that. NBA talent. We touched on that at the beginning. I think there are 6 players on this team that'll play in the NBA. And then I think you need to have a top 20 and top 20 offense and defense. Arizona's got that. And my biggest reason for Arizona winning a championship, a 5th that I won't say for every team, but for Arizona, it's the distribution of trust and balance that they've had so early in this season. So many times you watch a team, you're like, wow, that team plays really well together, but they hinge on Denzel Valentine for Michigan State a while ago. It was, if he played great, they had a chance to win a championship. He got in foul trouble against Middle Tennessee State, and they lost in the first round. So my 4 ones are like dead set ironclad. I feel that every year. The 5th one, I think Arizona uniquely has tremendous balance, but also top tier talent. So what do you make of that? And do you have any to add as someone who's seen more games and played in more big games than I have?
Yeah, well, so Leif, I love this question. I talk about it every year. Our studio crew at Fox. I have a very specific formula. It has 5 components on it. There's a 6th, but it's not set in stone, right? I have 5 that are set in stone. And then I have a couple that are like, and I keep adding to it every year too, as we get more and more data. So I have 5 prerequisites for a title team. And let's be clear, I think we're talking about winning a championship, not making a Final Four. There are a lot of teams that can make a Final Four. Arizona is obviously one of those, but I think there's probably 25 teams in the country that can make a Final Four, maybe even more than that, right? I mean, NC State made a Final Four 2 years ago.
True.
They were a 9 seed who barely got in and had to win 6 straight games just to get there. So, but we're talking about cutting down the nets. My number 1 prerequisite for a team cutting down the net is you have to be ranked in the top 12 of the Week 6 AP poll, right? This is something that I think you're aware of this. A lot of college basketball diehards know. Since 2004, every title winner has been ranked in the top 12 during that specific week's top 6 AP poll. Why would it be the Week 6 AP poll? Well, it's because in the non-conference, you go and play the Maui Invitational or these MTEs, and you're going out and playing different conferences. And after about 6 weeks of non-conference, we then start to really separate the men from the boys. And then we go into conference, and not that conference doesn't matter, but it's just not an indicator of who is potentially good enough to win a national championship. It's already been decided. Now the conferences just beat up on each other. Okay. So that's number 1. Number 2, we touched on it already a little bit, but of the last 47 national champions, 46 of the last 47 have had a first-round NBA draft pick, not just a draft pick, not a second-rounder, not a guy that made it later, a first-round NBA draft pick. That's remarkable to think about that. So if you're any fan of any team, I know the people that are watching this are Arizona fans, but if you were, whatever, it doesn't matter, Houston fan or a Michigan State fan, you have to ask yourself, do we have an NBA player, a first-round NBA player? If we don't, we're not winning it. And if you're asking, what is the one team that didn't? So 47 national championships, 46 have had a first rounder. The one that didn't was Indiana back in the 80s. Steve Alford, who's now the head coach for Nevada. Steve Alford won a national championship in his years with the Indiana Hoosiers and was drafted in the second round, but he was drafted like 29th. And so that was back when they only had 28 NBA teams. So if he were drafted now, he would have been a first round draft pick. So that's kind of an interesting caveat there. Number 3 is balance. Is part of yours too. So mine is top 25 balance. I think you said top 20. 20 of the last 21 national champions have all finished rated in the top 25 of both offense and defense. So you can't be a totally awesome offense, maybe like an Alabama, but your defense ranks 90th in the country. That ain't going to get it done. You're not going to cut down nets. The only champion, so the 20 of 21 have done that. The only one that did not do that
Baylor
was UConn in 2014. So Baylor's defense started the tournament ranked 44 in defensive efficiency, but their run through the tournament, Leif, if you go back and check KenPom, they finished 22nd.
Gotcha.
But before that tournament started, they were 44th, which gives you a little gray area. So I'm glad you're a student of the game, Leif. That's why I appreciate you. So you were on that right away, because that was one of the ones that I was like having a discussion about. And so because of that, it makes sense though, doesn't it? Yep. That a team that's like, let's say a team's 39th in offense or defense, doesn't matter, but they get it together, and they're, to win a national championship, you're likely going to have to beat some of the best teams in the country, and your numbers are going to go way up, right? There's a reason you would win a national championship. So there is gray area. It's not about like, hey, is this team top 25 in both before the season start or before the tournament starts, excuse me. You do want that little gray area. So, but there's a threshold. If a team's like 70th in defense, that's not it. Like, but if they're 40th, you're like, oh, okay, let me include this group in a potential national champion.
And for reference, Arizona's top 5 in each for the fans. I don't want to cut you off there, but I just want to make sure Arizona knows there's very little gray area in this discussion, because they're
the only team in the country right now as it stands in the top 5 of both. Am I right about that?
Duke has flirted with both, but right now Arizona's firmly in. Duke's kind of bounced between like 5th and 6th offensively.
Yep, Duke's in the top 10 of both. I think there's 3 teams in the top 10 of both, but only one in the top 5 of both. I mean, we're splitting hairs here too. But okay, so I've already gone through 3 of my prerequisites. The 4th prerequisite for me is an interesting one. At least 2 losses before the NCAA tournament starts.
Interesting.
The last 48 champions in a row have had at least 2 losses. So think about that. So, we've had some undefeated teams, the Wichita State teams, the St. Joe's team, the Kentucky team in 2014, I believe, was 38-0. And then we lost
Gonzaga with Suggs lost to that Baylor team
in the national title. And so that to me is so fascinating. It makes sense when you talk about Gonzaga. They play in the WCC. They're smashing everybody except for St. Mary's. They don't get challenged. It makes sense for Wichita State, who I think was in the Missouri Valley Conference at the time, not being tested. That totally checks out. But, the Kentucky ones that we were running, because that was in the SEC, they were getting challenged. They just happened to run into Frank Kaminsky and Sam Decker in Wisconsin and lost. So that one doesn't really fit in that criteria, but it that makes sense to me. It totally matters that you have been pushed, that you have played other NBA talent on a regular basis. And of course,
would it bother you if Arizona somehow ended up with 1 or 0 losses, even though they'd play Houston, they'd play Iowa State, they'd play all these teams? That would be a negative for you, because I understand what you're saying, that they've had some resistance as opposed to Gonzaga steamrolling everyone, the Missouri Valley with Wichita. But the Big 12, I think we both agree, is the best team, best conference, especially the top 6. They got, in my opinion, 6 of the best 12 teams in the country. If Arizona were to come through unscathed, 1 loss or 2 losses, that would be something you'd consider going back on, or is it still ironclad?
It is ironclad. Leave. I'm telling you, the last 48 champs in a row. This is a set in stone, which is so fascinating. It's like if I was an Arizona fan, like true blue and red, I'd be like, I want this team to get beat a couple times, not once, a couple of times. I know that sounds like super bizarre, but I'm telling you, I would want that. This team needs to be humbled. They need to get smacked. They're not going to get blown out. I think that's like almost literally impossible. This team needs to get beat multiple times. Yes, this is not so. If Arizona goes in, if they somehow win the Big 12 by 1 game, I'm not going to be thrilled about that. But they'd have to win the Big 12 conference tournament as well. Which some would argue that winning the Big 12 tournament this year will be just as hard as making a Final Four. or winning a national championship. That's how good the conference is at the top. So, but yeah, it's an ironclad one, man. I'm not going like there's too much data.
If we get to that point where they enter the tournament with one or zero losses, I'll have to reach back out to you and see if there's anything that swayed you. I'm doubting it because it sounded like an ironclad, but I'll certainly reach out and see if we can pick your brain on it then. And you got one more, and then a second one. You said 5th and 6th, so I'll turn it over to you for your final prerequisites.
Experience is my final prerequisite. Now, so we touched on this a little bit before, but the last team to win a national championship with freshmen as their best player, like clearly their best player was 2015 Duke and Julie Okafor, and then before that was 2012 with Anthony Davis and Kentucky. But in the last 20 years, those are the only 2 teams that have done it. And I think it may be in the 10 years prior to that, so maybe in the last 30 years, Carmelo Anthony led Syracuse to a national championship. It's just rare. So while this one is ironclad to me, there's way more gray area to this one than there is the others because there is precedence. You can do it. But if we're talking about team like Arizona stacking up with other teams, or they're playing other teams that are as good, have pros, and they're older, I think Arizona might be swimming up water in a game like that. That's what Duke ran into with Houston. And last year, I picked Duke to win my bracket, going against this thing, Leif. I went against it because I was like, I'm watching Duke. Duke has been dominant. They are better than Houston. They are better than Florida, in my opinion, and they couldn't get there. So it's, again, you start going against your own ironclad things, and you get burnt. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I finally did not go against my ironclad thing, and I picked Florida. A couple years before, I was like dead set on UConn, and everyone's going to take UConn. I got to take Purdue, even though I knew when they played they weren't going to have a chance. So I took Florida last year. So my last question to you: does any team have more of these prerequisites that they hit? Does anyone hit 4 of 5 like Arizona does? Or is Arizona your firm number 1 contender right now? I know they don't have the losses yet, but there's still season to go. And I would say they go 4 for 4 otherwise, because Jaden Bradley and Koa Pete 1A, 1B. So it's not quite as much of a, Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple, the youngest. There are some vets on this team. So my final question to you is Arizona going to win the championship?
I think it's either Arizona or Michigan. I think if I had to choose today, and again, Michigan's playing Michigan State tonight, I think Michigan Wolverines are going to win the national championship.
Oh, yeah. My fans aren't going to love it, but I do have fans in the chat already saying they love you. So I appreciate your time. I don't want to take any more of it. I hope to chat with you again before the end of this season. We can revisit this discussion as the season progresses, but nonetheless, thank you very much for your time. And hopefully the Arizona team is a true blue blood contender in your prerequisites. Once the bracket's revealed and you're looking through your 6, all of a sudden they check all those boxes and they can sway your mind, because right now they're a pleasure for me to watch. So thank you for listening, and thank you guys for listening to Locked On Wildcats. Tomorrow I'll have a postcast for Arizona State. That's a big one. It feels like it's a small one with all this national championship talk, but it's the rival. Make sure you subscribe, follow Locked On Wildcats so you get the latest episodes with me. Follow me on Twitter. It's just my name, Leif Thulin. Interact with me there. I'd love to chat. I'm very active on the college basketball community, and if Locked On Wildcats made your Spotify rep, prove it on social media. Get a free month of the Everydayer Club. Just tag our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social platform. We'll drop you a code, and you can be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club. So for those of you listening on or watching on YouTube, we'll send you to our first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure you make your second listen, Locked On College Football. And as always, guys, thanks for listening, and bear down.